Okay, hi Year 11s. I'm just going to go through with you now that process of seeing an essay question and what you're going to do with it. So I've just picked the first one in the list. And the first thing I'll do is look at the keywords. So this one, the keyword that I have picked out is struggles. And I'll straight away sort of breaking down in my mind, well, what is that actually asking me? It's asking me to compare the struggles faced by the characters in Romeo and Juliet and Footloose. So struggles, what does it mean by struggles? Well, I guess it's talking about the challenges. So what are the things that the difficulties, the opposition, where things don't go smoothly, the conflict in both Romeo and Juliet and Footloose. So remember, step one is write some keywords. Then I'm going to question the question. So I'm going to ask a few questions about this to start me thinking. So the questions that I'm going to ask, I'm just thinking, what are the challenges? Okay, so what are the challenges in Romeo and Juliet? And what are the challenges in Footloose? Okay, we've got who, we've got the impact of the challenges. We've got the cause of the challenges. Okay. And how they deal with the challenges. These are all things that we could look at. So now, I've done step one, which is look up the words and define. Step two, question the question. Now step three, I've got to come up with my three main points and my contention. So to do that, I've got to kind of know, I've got to base my essay around themes. So I'm going to think of what are the main struggles in both of these texts. So I might start with thinking about, okay, so there's family conflict, perhaps, that the struggles in both Romeo and Juliet and Footloose caused by conflict in the family, or perhaps I might call that conflict in family relationships. Maybe I might think about, well, what are the causes or impacts, or what are the things about conflict in both of them? And in both in both the Romeo and Juliet play and the film Footloose, there is also this conflict or this struggle that's caused by society's expectations. So the pressure of society. And I might also look at possibly, so I might also look at the struggle caused by maybe a lack of agency, or the inability to determine, control their own lives. So I might look at these three themes and how in both texts, how these kind of manifest, I guess. So that it's coming up with three main points, which I've just done. And the next step is I then have to look at the evidence for each. So what key events and what quotes from the text for each paragraph. So if I start the paragraph based on conflict in family relationships. So paragraph 1, I have to come up with a point sentence that's to do with family relationships. So I might say something like, both Footloose and Romeo and Juliet show that characters may face difficulties due to conflict in family relationships. Okay. Relationships. There you go. Something like that will show, it's a broad point sentence that shows the theme. So we call it maybe that a thematic point sentence. And then I have to think of what examples I might use. So for these ones, I'm looking for struggles to do with conflict in family relationships. So in Footloose, the one that stands out for me, I'm going to usually try and find the most obvious or the most relevant examples. That's one way that I show the criteria of highly relevant use of textual evidence. So the Footloose, I might use the relationship between Ariel and Reverend Shawmore, okay, or Reverend Shaw, Reverend Moore, whichever you prefer to call him. So I could use this example as a general example. Then I would need to find a scene, perhaps a quote that shows that conflict, and I would need to analyze that by selecting some form of meta language that might be to do with a choice of a camera angle, or a song lyric, or a sound effect or something. So I need to find that, but I think that wouldn't be too difficult to show. But then I would also need to think of a Romeo and Juliet example, and I could show, perhaps I might choose Juliet and the relationship with her parents, to do the conflict within the family over the arranged marriage. And then I would need to, that would be my general example, that I would then need to find a quote or an event, and I would need to find something to analyze that with, which is to do with Shakespeare's vocabulary, perhaps what word he uses to show the tension, the anger, or whether they're strained, but in that relationship, perhaps. I would need to find something that I could use as meta language there, and that would be my paragraph 1. So then I need to find back where was my points over here? Okay, society's expectations. All right, then I'd need to come up with a point, new paragraph, a point sentence to do with society's expectations. In both texts. So both texts reveal that society's expectations can lead to struggles for the characters, etc., etc. And I'd need to find an example from, we can start with Footloose. Okay, society's expectations. Perhaps this one I could just simply use, let's have a look. The dancing ban, or the censorship, or the desire for independence, something here. I could use perhaps Wren's dance I could use for an example, perhaps, but I'd need to pick the event and quote, and some form of analysing that. Now I can use more than one event / quote if I can remember it, and if it fits and it's not just not continuing to add more information that without a purpose. Then I might come up with Romeo and Juliet, and perhaps it might be to do with, in Romeo and Juliet, to do with society's expectations about what a dutiful daughter does, perhaps. Dutiful daughter's role. To do with obedience, maybe. And I would need an event, quote, and analysis. Analysis, you could use a scene direction, you could use, there's a lot of metaphors and similes. And the final one with my planning was to do with the lack of agency, okay, or the inability to determine own destiny or make own decisions. Okay, so we would say that in both texts, characters have challenges that are caused by the fact that they lack agency in their ability to determine their own destiny and their own future and make decisions for themselves in their own lives. Here for Romeo and Juliet, I would use, perhaps, just think of the first one, the decision that that Romeo and Juliet are unable to decide who they love because of the family's expectations or their family conflict, perhaps. I would need a quote, possibly event, and analysis for that. I'd have to go and find those. And for Footloose, and if I've used censorship earlier, then I might use dancing here. If I use dancing earlier, I might use censorship here. Both of them would actually fit quite well in terms of not being able to determine their own destiny. So in Footloose, it might be to do with the characters not being able to choose what to read at school, or not being able to choose how to express their passion for life, to celebrate their coming of age through dance, but you would need whatever that event is and a quote, and don't forget the meta language, scene direction there. Okay, so that's my planning. So I would need to have, then I need to come up with my contention. Remember, your contention statement is your one main idea of the whole essay. So it will be something very general. Often it's just a restating of the essay topic. Sometimes you agree with it or disagree with it, but it is some form of restatement of the essay topic. So I'd come back to my essay topic, which is simply compare the struggles faced by characters in Romeo and Juliet. And I might say the main idea of the whole essay is the characters in Romeo and Juliet and Footloose face a variety of challenges. Now, I could just leave it at that. but I could give more information. So, caused by their families and society. Perhaps if I wanted to actually make it some more detail than just the essay topic. But that is just my first instinctive look at the first topic there, and the process that I would go through. I'd do that really quickly in my head as soon as I see it. When I see the essay topic, you have only like 5-10 minutes to really break it down and start planning before you then have to start writing if you want to fit it into that 1 hour time slot. So there you go. Hope that helps some of you guys, especially those of you who perhaps are missing from class this week. But don't forget, you've only got 10 days until your SAC. Good luck with that, everyone, and I'll see you in class.